Okay, Baruch Hashem, we have the zechut to once again look at the Tzurba Rabbanon. We're up to volume 17. We're in the middle of volume 17. We're actually towards the end of volume 17. We're in the middle of Hilchot Bishul Aleph, Shir Aleph. We're splitting it up into two shirim. Baruch Hashem, we did get the volume 18, and thank you to our donors who helped us get them. And we shipped them out to Queens. We got some for here, some people ordered as well as for the shul. So everyone will have one. Because Hashem will start that next week. Okay, so we're in Hilchot Bishul. Let's just do a quick chazara, a quick review of what we learned last week, and continue with this week's shir. Okay, so to review briefly what we learned last week, we learned about the malacha of Bishul, and what would be a tolda and what would be the av of the Bishul, right? There's no difference between what is an av, what is a tolda, but it seems in the Rambam that cooking, like food and herbs, that's considered the av, and other sites of like cooking metal and other things like that, that would be more like a tolda. Definition for Bishul, for liquids. So we said it's yad soleded bo. Once you hit yad soleded bo, that is considered cooking a liquid. What exactly was yad soleded bo? We had different opinions in the temperature, and we came out with the conclusion that we do it by tasting the food. If something that you can eat easily, that's less than yad soleded bo. Something that you can't, it's hard to take it. That is yad soleded bo. That's what we paskin, and we said that was the halach lamaisa when it comes to that. We then said, what about making liquid warm? Can you put it by the fire? And we said you could put it opposite the fire, but you can't put it in a place where it will get to yad soleded bo. So if you want to take out the chill, you can do that by putting it in a place where it won't get to yad soleded bo. Then we had the big talk, and this is what really we end off with, was yafa koach haben mikoach ha'av. Right? That was regarding what? The chama, that was cooking bishul b'chama, right? So we said that cooking in the sun is not considered cooking, but cooking with the tolda of the chama, right? The ben, that's where the yafa koach haben and koach ha'av would be a problem. Okay, so tolda as a chama would be a problem, whereas the cooking with the chama would not be. What exactly was the issue with the chama? Why was that okay? Why was it okay to cook with the sun? So Rashi said it was not the derech bishul. Exactly what did that mean? It's not derech bishul. Is the result different? Is it just that it's not using fire? And that's how microwaves got involved. Is microwaves fire? Is it not fire? And Rav Moshe said that maybe it is fire because today that's the way it's the derech of bishul, perhaps. And then we ended off with the dud shemesh, which was the solar water heating systems. And we said that, first of all, according to Rav Moshe, that may have been a problem because that's the way they cook water, right? That's the derech bishul of water. Now, to making hot water in Eretz Yisrael in a lot of places. So maybe it is derech bishul. And then we said, no, not necessarily. It's a gram of segresha. It's not something that I really want, so I'm not worried about the toldas chama. But then we said that I believe Shuki was said that even in Eretz Yisrael, even though you have all these reasons, they don't really use the dud shemesh. They don't really use it. Right, because it's tolas lachama.
The minute you use
cold water goes in, mixes with the hot water, which is now be cooking with the tolas lachama, which would be the problem. But we had many reasons why that would be okay. So I saw two reasons. One of them we brought down over here already, which was that it's Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said we have to be very careful because in a lot of the homes they have both the gas, electric, and or the solar. So you might get confused. And so since you don't want them to be confused, lo plug. But then we saw that in the Yalkut Yosef, he brought that, yes, it's true, you have all these reasons, but in the end of the day, it's a Tolda Chama, and it's in a Kli Rishon. The Dud Shemesh is all connected. It's a Kli Rishon. So people to stay away from a Tola Bracha. And then we saw that there was a solar that uses now a Kli Sheni.
But
okay, so
they said they put a commercial, it's a Mehadri.
And still people don't use it.
I checked with the Rabbi Ohad.
Yeah.
So we figure out why, because it has to be electric to light it up. in order to be kli rishon and kli sheni. And if we forget to light it up,
So then you have the same
that's
problem
it.
again.
It's a problem.
So,
So it's the
yeah.
same thing as electric gas.
Right,
If you
right,
forget, you can't
right.
touch it because you're gonna activate it.
So I think in the end of the day, although there's ways to use it, probably b'shas chag and tzarech as a great tzarech, then perhaps there will be room for leniency. But
all the rabbanim over there say, see, I looked online, all of them, they say adif shelo.
adif.
Adif shelo.
When it's a cliche.
Adif shelo להתעסק עם זה.
But Yom Tov is probably.
All right, so that's just a whole different issue. Okay, that is basically a quick review of where we ended off last week regarding Bishul. So today we're starting in page 314, and we're going to get into one aspect of this, which is the topic of Ein Bishul Acher Bishul, that there is no cooking after cooking. Now, do we know this? Where do we get this from? What's going on? So the first, okay, so where does halacha come from? So we're going to have two Gemaras that seem to be saying opposite stuff. Let's see, source 28, page 314. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat that tells us, Kol Shabbat bechamin me'erev Shabbat, everything that was already placed in hot water me'erev Shabbat, Shorin oto bechamin b'Shabbat. So you're allowed to put it in hot water even on Shabbat, right? Which seems to be that if you have something that's cooked, you can put it back on the fire on Shabbat. This is one of the ways they used to cook, was soaking it in hot water. Okay, this would be simple, maybe similar to like chalti bach and other foods like that. You cook in a sack and you put it in the hot water and it cooks it up in the bag. Maybe that's what it's related to. But anyway, something that's cooked on Shabbat, you can put it back in the water and to cook it on Shabbat. Put it back on the fire. Now, there's a Gemara Masechet Shabbat says a little bit differently. Why do they say that you can't do tomnin? Now, tomnin, we didn't learn about tomnin yet. Hatmana. Hatmana is insulating. We're going to have a whole shiur on hatmana, so just keep. The problem is that you're insulating the heat, you're keeping the heat, you're retaining, you're making it. We'll see what happens over here. Okay. So what's she'enu mosif heva? What does that mean?
It stays the same.
Right. It's not adding the heat.
Whatever you put it there.
Okay. But they say ain't from when it gets dark. Gizera. What's the gizera? That's going to come more cooking.
You're going to put something can mosif pepper.
Okay.
If they're going to
what does that imply?
If they're going to steal shelo mosif pepper, then
what does that imply? You're telling me don't insulate it because it might get more heat.
Fire.
That means that if you're cooking it more, it's a problem, right? You have one Gemara that tells, one Mishnah that tells me if you're already cooked, you can put it back. And this Gemara seems to say, don't do hatmana because it may cook and that's going to be a problem. What do you mean? It's already cooked. Okay. So what's the explanation? So we have the Rishonim, we have the Rosh, and we have the Tur. So let's start with the Rosh. He says as follows. Lamadnu she'apet tavshil nitbashel, that was cooked, v'nistanen, and got cold. Shaykh be bishul kiven sheyesh bo mashka. Oh, he says, you know when this case is about the hatmana, that's a problem. They say it's going to get more cooked. That's when it's a liquid. That's when it's a liquid. Avahadam rinin kol sheba b'cham l'fnei Shabbat sharin oto b'chamim b'Shabbat hainu davar yavish. This is when you have davar yavash. When you have something that is dry. So the Rosh is the first one here to make this differentiation between liquid and solids. Liquids, he says, you can't heat up. That's a Gemara. And you could heat up a solid. Now, how much? Now, this is the second point. Now, we talked about a liquid that it's yat soleded. That's the cooking point. That's considered bishul. What's considered bishul by solids? So the Rosh's opinion is umistavra the achlo higil machal ben darsai ben dorsai. What's this machal ben dorsai? A third or a half, depending we learn. Well, who's this ben dorsai guy? He's a bandit, right? He's a highway robber. He can't wait for his food to cook. So once it's a somewhat edible, he already eats it. So this says the Rosh the achlo higil machal ben dorsai. Right, what is it? So if you stir the pot while it's not yet to that degree of cooking, you're chayav al bishul. Right? But what do you say? If it cooled down and one boiled it, he is liable. Okay? That's when it's dealing with liquid. Okay? That's when it's dealing with liquid. Okay. So let's just take a look a minute, 1 second. What did the Rush say? Get the what did the Rush say? Rush say solids.
There's no problem.
Solids you can reheat.
Yeah.
No problem. Ain't bishul achar bishul.
No problem.
Liquid, there is. What's considered cooked solid? Machal ben dersai. 1/3, 1/2, whatever you want to call it. We'll see what that is later. We're not going to get into that. Okay, now the Torah. Who's the Torah? Who's the Torah to the Rush? Is who?
No, the grandfather. No?
The son, not son-in-law. Son.
Son.
Son. Okay? So the Torah writes as follows. He writes, the imloy nitzvashel kol tzorcho. Okay? Val fil nitzvashel kemachal ben dorsai, shaykh ba bishul, afilu ba odro. Even in its own boiling waters. So what is he arguing with at which point in this bowl? He's saying that something is not cooked when it gets to the 1/3, 1/2, the machal ben dorsai. It has to be cooked completely. So if you have a third cook, it's machal ben dorsai, half cooked, and you want to say it's already cooked, I'm going to reheat it. According to the Torah, you cannot do that. Okay, we'll see. I don't know. I'm not up to the Shulchan Aruch yet. I'm up to this point now.
No offense.
Like a rare, very.
You put on a heat, it's gonna be.
He wants to say like a rare steak,
Like a very rare steak, like this fancy restaurant. You know?
right?
Yeah.
They tell you don't even order it medium. You have to order it rare.
Yeah.
They don't want to even cook it for you.
Yeah.
Right?
But we are gonna
So now you put that on the hot plate, so then.
Yeah, that would be considered cooking. I mean, I would say so.
According to.
Let's just, without going through the whole thing, if it's going to ruin it, it's going to get better, that's a whole nother side issue. But for our understanding, if something is not cooked completely, whatever that means, and the food is not cooked completely, then if you putting it on the fire, according to the Torah, that is bishul. Bishul achar. So it's not yet considered completely cooked.
And Rosh would say it is.
The Rosh says if you got it to machal ben dorsai, then there is no more bishul after that. That's already considered bishul. So that's the machloket Rosh and the Torah. Okay. Now, what is the reason? What was the reason to say that when liquid cools down? Why would we want to say, the Russian Torah want to say that there is a chiluk between a solid and a liquid? What would be the reason? So the Mishnah Berurah brings down the reason on page 316, source 32. The v'davar lach kivin she'azal chamimosai ben itztanen batel mimenu shem b'shuloi harishon. He says once it cools down water,
Right.
who knows it was cooked?
Right. Definitely.
How do I know it was cooked?
Only the chemistry.
Even the
Yeah,
chemist, even the
yeah,
chemistry.
the chemistry.
Because it's rare, so you see.
No, I tell you.
What?
If
If you take a cup of water, I cooked a cup of water,
Okay.
and now it cooled down.
Water fine.
No,
Yeah,
I
but-
tell you.
I see what he's getting to already. We'll talk about what you're talking about.
No, I will tell you the difference is when you take a cup of water just from the faucet, you cook it, it's gonna take you, let's say, 10 minutes.
Okay, it's already
And-
cooked, takes less.
When you cook and when you recook it, it's gonna take less minutes.
Okay. So, but the Mishnah Berurah says, in reality, you take a look at the cup, you don't know if it was cooked before or not. I don't know.
Tastes the same. Yeah.
Okay. I know some people say they can taste if it's been cooked.
Water, boiling water.
Some people say they can taste the boiled water versus not. But that's the Mishnah Berurah says. Mishnah says, "When it's done in batel mimenu shem b'shila." It's not. It's the name of cooking is no longer on it because it's no longer hot.
Because water, just like that, you don't see the difference, you don't
Right,
taste the
right,
difference,
right.
nothing.
Okay.
So there's no bishul over here.
Okay.
Even if you mevasher
Now
it,
the Rambam. This is a famous Rambam. It calls all the Yemenites, so all the Temanim, well not all, but maybe
Right.
some of them. They hold by this Rambam.
Right.
Okay.
right.
Which is
Putting in soup,
right. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see about that.
Now it's the time to press the pan button.
Okay. So says the Rambam, one who cooked foods that's been completely cooked, davar she'en mushal kol tzarcho, or davar she'en tzarich bishul klal potter. So he says anything that's completely cooked, and Rambam doesn't make a differentiation between solids and liquids. He just says anything that's completely cooked or anything that doesn't need cook, it's not considered cooking. Now he uses lashon potter. This is problematic. Right, because usually Hilchos Shabbos, when it says potter, it means potter.
And he says hamivashel, someone who did, sounds like
Right.
somebody who did it already.
So we're not going to deal with this at the moment, but this is an issue over here.
I understand a little bit different.
Yeah, what did
Not
you
like
understand?
No, I tell you what, המבשל על האור דבר שהיה מבושל כל צורכו, he's talking about, let's say, a veg.
How? Why are you saying that?
No, wait.
Wait,
let me finish.
okay. Okay.
עוד דבר שאינו צריך בישול כלל פטור. It means, when you put a soup, if you think you drink the soup hot, it's already, if it's cold, it's not good for you. Then you have to put it in מבשל. It was good, then you will drink it as is it.
So it's not mebushal until you get the way you want it.
Exactly, until it's hot for you.
I don't know.
So
It doesn't seem
when
to
you
say
put
that.
it on the fire, it means it's nothing was done before, and now you are
That's a
going-
second case. He's saying something that ain't tzarech bishul, something that doesn't need cooking,
עוד דבר שאינו צריך בישול כלל.
doesn't need cooking at all.
But when you see this soup come from the refrigerator,
Okay, we'll
now,
deal with the soup in a moment. Give me a minute.
If you say something cold, that it's not cooked.
If it's
That's it.
no,
It means
no,
that
right.
it's cooked. You're just
No.
warming it up
He's
because
right.
you like it hot.
no.
Okay.
If it's cooked already, you could eat it. You could eat it even if it's cooked. Let's say schnitzel or any other meat. You could eat it. Maraq.
The nature people
people,
hot.
people don't drink
The nature-
maraq when
yeah.
it's cold.
Okay, let's move on. So the Rambam, for all intents and purposes, does not differentiate between solid and liquids. Okay. Now he uses lashon potter. That's problematic. Maybe it means you can't actually do a full bishul, like putting it on the fire. Maybe you can do other things. Some Mepharshim want to say the Meiri and others. Take a look at the bottom, note 33, if you want to. But now there is another Rishon, the Rashba. Okay, so the Rashba says, he says, any food that's cooked like machal ben dorsai, there is no, it's already considered cooked. You're not going to get in trouble if you stir the pot. It's fine, or closing the pot or anything. It's not a problem. There's no longer considered cooking. So you have the Rashba that says that cooking a solid is machal ben dorsai. Doesn't have to be cold circle. Doesn't have to be all completely. Okay, so the Rashba also, by the way, doesn't bring any differentiation between solid and liquids. So you have the Rambam, you have the Rashba, you also have a Ran. The Ran also doesn't make a differentiation between solid and liquid. So you have three heavy hitters over here. Okay, let's take a look in summary what we have. What machloket we have here. Take a look at page 317 on that box on the top. According to the Rashba and the Rosh, food is considered cooked once it's reached the point of machal ben dorsai. Once it's reached that point, it's considered cooked. Cooking any further is not a malacha, according to the Rashba and the Rosh. The Rambam and the Torah disagree. They maintain that only fully cooked food is considered cooked. So you have 2 and 2. Okay? Rambam and Torah say you have to be fully cooked. Rashba and Rosh say machal ben dorsai. Second machloket, according to the Rosh and the Torah, reheating liquids which have been fully cooked is considered bishul. Right? Rosh and the Torah both say you can't reheat a liquid. That's the differentiation and the differences in the two Gemaras. According to the Rambam and the Rashba, there is no difference between liquids and solids. It's all the same.
But the Rashba is talking about, I think, about salad, right? Machal ben dorsai.
Yeah, but he doesn't bring a differentiation. Nowhere the Rashba says that liquids are different than solids,
So
assuming that they're the same.
What is a liquid? When is machal ben dorsai by liquid?
Oh, very good. Very good. We have. And the Ashkenazim use it. Yeah. Let me get through it. You're not letting me get through. So I can't say anything. We're getting there. Okay. Now, the Eglei Tal, he wants to say that perhaps the Rambam would agree that you can't reheat water. But he would agree you can reheat soup. That he makes a differentiation. Eglei Tal wants to say the Rambam would agree you can't reheat water, but you could reheat soup. That's reheating water would be a problem according to the Rambam. And he says as follows. So the Lashon of the Rambam in Perek Tes Halacha Aleph, and this was the first Rambam we saw in this shir. So just take a look at it with me. Let's go back a couple of pages. We're on page 296. If you go back over there, the Rambam writes, Echad ofe et apat o mevashel et ha'ma'achal o et ha'simanin o ha'mechamchem ha'mechamem. Is that how you pronounce it in Hebrew? Ha'mechamem et ha'mayim hakol inin echad. Now. Pay attention to the lashon of the Rambam. Says the Eglei Hatam. He says, ha'mechamem et ha'mayim chayiv. V'chiven de mikol hayni mashma de mayim. Lo shaykh behem lashon bishul ela lashon chimum. So Eglei Tal says the Rambam says there is no cooking by water; it's chimum, and the problem with water is chimum, is making it hot. Making it hot, right? The chimumu hu bishlo. That is its cooking, but there is no cooking by water. It's warming it up, and that's its cooking. Right. That's why he says water would be hayah. Water would be a problem according to the Rambam, says the Eglei Tal. Just like when you melt down metals.
What is the soup? It's the
So he said. So look. When it cools down, it's no longer cooked. You're going to be chayiv again. And this is the diak of Rabbeinu Yonah that he says, "Omayim." If you cook it up, that would be a problem. So what is the Eglei Tal saying? Is that water is different, but soup, why would soup be different? Soup is not water. Soup, you can tell it's cooked, right? You don't use a lashon of chimum by soup. You lashon of bishul. Why? The carrot is now cooked. The chicken is now cooked. There's cooked items there. It's cooked. It's a food that's cooked. Water may be different.
They make soup with the
I don't know.
Water and
Something there. Cream of soup, cream of barley, cream of pumpkin.
You know what? Some skin. Yeah, some skin. That's it.
But there's
When
some.
people used to be full,
So
they used to put some skin in there, then put
okay,
some water.
and fine.
And this
And
water
fine. Says the Eglei Tal, it's not water.
What?
Eglei Tal says it's not water. Once it's water only, that's a problem because that is chimum. That's not bishul. But food, any food that's being cooked, whether it's pumpkin soup or cream of barley, whatever it is, you see it's a food, and therefore there the Rambam would agree that it's no bishul after bishul by that, but not regular water. I don't know what Timanim do if they even heat up water. They heat up water also, regular water.
No,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they hold this Eglei Tal or not.
No.
But that is the Eglei Tal. He makes this differentiation.
But I heard they take
Soup.
from the refrigerator. And
Right. This I know also. I don't know how if they do it by water too. I don't know. I say I don't know. I don't have many Timanim friends. You're gonna ask.
They're gonna start a fight in the them and they start shooting.
Okay. So now we have all the different opinions. We had the Rambam, the Rashba, the Rosh, the Tur. Now it's time to come to our trusty Shulchan Aruch to see what the Shulchan Aruch would say over here. Shulchan Aruch, what does he say? Tavshil shenitvashel kol tarcho. Page 317. So he says it has to be completely cooked. Okay? Not like the Rashba and the Rosh, it says Machal ben Dursai, completely cooked. Yesh b'mishum bishul im stanen. If it cools down, it's going to be bishul, right? Vim loin dishvash called tzurcha v'afil nitvash Machal ben Dursai shaykh bo bishul afil bo roteach. Behind me means sheyesh bo bishul acher bishul, but tavshil sheyesh bo marik. It's when it has liquid. That's when you have a problem with bishul acher bishul by liquid. Aval davar shenitvashel kvar. If you have something that's already cooked and it is solid, mutar l'sharoto b'hamim b'shabbat. You can put it back on the fire. You can put it back on a warm plate or a blech or something like that. Right? There are right. So Shuki is pointing out to a point of the rabbinic enactments of Hazara. In order to put something back on a fire, there are certain gezerot you have to have in place, right? You can't put it on a direct fire. It has to be covered. It has to be a warm plate, something like that. We're not getting into Hazara today. In the next volume, we're going to have a whole shir on Hazara, but that exists. Right now, we're dealing with the point of Bishul Acher Bishul. So right now, the Shulchan Aruch says, you have something that's solid, It's no bishul acher bishul. Liquid there is.
Time we have
The plata, right? Right. Okay.
I don't think so anybody use fire.
Direct
Use
fire. Okay, but it's after important to know. Okay.
There's the plan is kind of bullshit.
The black. You have the metal.
Brass, it's a brass, thick piece, very thick. Put the flame, you put it on
Right,
fire.
right.
And the flame is low, stay
Right,
low.
because it's a covered fire.
Touch the fire.
We'll get it. This halachot of Chazara, we'll get it to it eventually. B'ezrat Hashem. Okay. So what do we have? Shulchan Aruch, very simple.
Yeah.
Food is considered cooked when it's completely cooked, not machal ben dursai. You only can put back on the fire. No, not let's use that and put it back. Let's use lashon. There is no bishul acher bishul by solid when it's completely cooked. There is bishul acher bishul by liquids. That's the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, now we come to a Ramah. This is a leniency by the Ashkenazim, but because of their leniency, they have more gezerot by Chazara about returning a liquid, because they have a leniency of when you can return a liquid. Okay, so says the Ramah in the next section 37. V'yesh makil leimer, afil nitstanon, even if it is cool mutter, if a liquid he's talking about. V'nahagu lahaka b'zeh im lo nitstanen legamre. Says the Ramah that as long as the liquid didn't cool down completely, you can warm it back up. Okay? For us, Sephardim, who hold the Shulchan Aruch, it has to be that it's still yad soledet bo. It still has to be considered cooked. Once it gets lower than yad soledet bo, we do not put it back to warm back up. Ashkenazim say that even if it goes down than yad soledet bo, as long as it's not completely cooled, we're going to have to see what that means. When I'm good, they can put it back.
Okay. No, I think
Yeah.
Can return.
Yes. Now it's talking about liquid now.
No, Rabbi, I think you did it
Lach.
right. I think you did it
This
right.
is lach. This is.
You have to read like this.
I'm reading it right.
No, look.
Okay.
דבר שפשל כל תוקפו והוא יבש,
אין בו מרק.
שאין בו מרק.
מותר נגיד מדבר אפילו מקום שיש by. Right. I didn't read the Shulchan. I read.
אפילו מצטנן כבר.
Right. Continue reading.
It's already cooled down.
Continue reading. Continue reading the Ramah. Continue reading the Ramah. Okay. Here. Let me sum it up for you. We have a different sefer over here. The Lord Shabbat B'Naxon. Let me read it to you. Shulchan Aruch rules that a davar lach, such as water or soup, cannot be reheated once it's no longer yad soledet bo. This we know.
Okay.
Furthermore, for a davar lach, one may not place the pot. Okay, this isn't talking about. However, Ashkenazim are lenient and may reheat a davar lach if it's slightly warm, even though it is no longer as yad soledet bo. Once it's completely cooled off, even Ashkenazim may no longer reheat it. Okay? They have more gezerot of chazara, how to put back when it comes to liquid. They have your hand on it. You can put it like this. You can put it like that. They have other stuff, but they hold that as long as the liquid has not completely cooled down, the Ramesh will tell us what that means. But if it's not completely cooled down, you can put it back on. That is that. Now the Chazon Ish is very. He's like, why is this? Why is this? If we say that there is bishul acher bishul by liquid, right, and that's what the Rosh and the Torah said, and that's Shulchan Aruch brought as halacha. So why we, the Ashkenazim, is saying we're allowed to put down a liquid that's no longer hot. It's not yad soledet bo. It's not completely cold, but it's not yad. You can put it back in the fire. Why is that? So he says as follows: there's no difference to make if it cooled down complete. They didn't cool down complete. If it's not yad soledet bo, it's not considered cooked anymore. You shouldn't put it back, and it's liquid. The kol she'ein yad soledet bo chashav min hadin kitzayin. Oh, so he says, what does he say?
So he's saying,
Likar din. No. Read further. She'anu tufsin leikar hadin. Hidat harambam v'harashba v'haran she'en isur lechamem et atzonen ma'ambushal. He says we're holding like really mikra din. We hold like the Rambam. There is no difference between liquid and solid, and you could return a liquid that cooled down, just like you can return a solid that cooled down. Right? He says, okay, another gezerah. Another gezerah, Gedr Chazara, because you have another thing of returning the food. But it says basically the Chazon Ish that really, according to the Ashkenazim, the halacha is like the Rambam also, that you could return a liquid. Now, the Ashkenazim don't do it. Confusing. You can't tell if it's been cooled down, it didn't cool down. But when it's not completely cool yet, not completely cold yet, we can hold like the Rambam and put it back. Says, okay. So comes out. This is very interesting. The Ashkenazim, according to the Chazon Ish, is learning this, is that they really hold like the Rambam. That there really is. You're really allowed to heat up a cooked liquid. We don't do it. They don't do it because we're worried. We don't do it. But when do we do it? When it's not completely cold yet. Not yet selected, but it's not completely cold. Now, what's considered not completely cold? Right? And it's not on the gamre. So Rav Moshe in his Igros Moshe says over here, in the bold part in 319, source 39, V'shir chamimot shetzarech liot belach laharama hu sharoi laochol laelo sherotzim laochol chamin. Oh, someone wants to have hot soup. He would still have it as warm soup, right? If it's passable as warm soup, then you can put it back, right? It's a coffee that I would drink. It's still warmish, right? And I would still drink it. I can put it back to warm up. Once it's at the point where no one would want to drink it, then you couldn't put it back. That's the red line for the Ashkenazim. Okay, that's so far what we have at this point. So at this point, what do we have? Once it's no longer passable as warm, that no one would drink it, no one would say it's warm, right? You got this coffee that it's
How
still
do we
warm.
determine that?
You can return it according to the Ashkenazim if it's cold, to that point, to that warmish. But once it's that, now for us the Faradim, we hold that and we say if it's not yet so let it go. That's it. We don't return it back, but it's considered cold. But we'll see. There might be some kulos on that as well, perhaps. Let's just continue with where we are holding right now. Now the Eglei Tal makes another appearance over here. And he wants to say, and this is what Rabbi Chaim was alluding to before, the Eglei Tal wants to say, not necessarily like the Chazon Ish. It's not necessarily like that we hold like the Rambam, that you could reheat a liquid, and we only do it if it's not completely cold. But perhaps he wants to say that since it's not completely cold, it's not really bishul. Why? Because a liquid, when it's not completely cold, it's like machal ben dursai by liquids. Right? You have the food, the solid food, that if you cook it up to a certain point, it's considered cooked. Machal ben dursai, we don't hold it like that, but we have that opinion. He says the same thing can be held by water, by liquids. That once it's not cold, it's considered machal ben dursai. The bandit doesn't have time for a really piping hot coffee. He's going to have his coffee when it's a little bit warm. And that's already considered cooked to that degree. So therefore, it's not cooking really, not the oraita, it's the rabbanon. It's the rabbanon. We'll go with this machal ben dursai by liquids, and we'll return it. It's another way to understand why Ashkenazim let to return a liquid that's not completely cold. Okay, so you have two opinions. Chazon Ish, really like the Rambam. Eglei Tal, maybe it's considered cooked enough, the oraita. It's machal ben dursai by liquids. Okay. We have the Orchot Shabbat on the next source on page 320. And this is for Ashkenazim. It goes through what they can, what they could. Okay? So if you take a look in Yutet or 19, just take a look at the first paragraph there. I'm skipping a lot of it because we're going to get into these dinim later. I'm not sure who it is. Shabbat. There's no prohibition of bishul for dry food that has been fully cooked, even if it's cooled down, since there's no prohibition against further cooking after the original cooking. There ain't bishul acher bishul by a solid food. Therefore, it's permitted to put such food on top of a pot of food or urn or its fire, even if it'll be temperature, even if it'll reach a temperature of yad soledibah. You can put it back to a blech or a hot plate, even if it's going to reach yad soledibah. Let's go to 20, Chav, okay, page 321. Regarding liquid that has been cooked and has cooled, the Ashkenazim make a difference between two situations. If it is cooled completely, it's forbidden to heat it a second time due to the prohibition of Bishul. If it is not cooled completely, even if it's cooled to a point lower than Yatzaledit Bo, heating it a second time is permitted, right? In such a situation, the rule that there's no further cooking after original cooking applies even to liquid, right? Then there is no Bishul even by liquid if it's not completely cool. Now, obviously, there is some the halachot of chazara, how you can return a liquid for Ashkenazim. There are some differences the way from we do because we don't hold it as less than Yad Solezbo, but that's what they say. Okay, now what about for us? He doesn't really bring down for us a nice review, so I find for you the review here in the Yalkut Yosef English edition, Shabbat 2 on page 321, halacha 57 in this book. He brings down a nice review. He says there is no prohibition against cooking kasal food on Shabbat if it was already completely cooked before Shabbat, right? And it applies even if the food has been in the refrigerator since before Shabbat began. So I cooked it on Thursday, right, or whatever it was. It's completely cooked in my refrigerator. Now Shabbat is, I can take it out and put it on the hot plate or the blach, whatever it is, if it's been completely cooked. Okay. Now it's forbidden to cook liquid foods, even if they were already completely cooked once before. One may not place a cooked liquid food onto a fire on Shabbat unless he fulfills all the conditions of Chazarah. So here and just for a quick second, just for us, in the first volume on page 131, what is the conditions? So the first condition, it is still at least Yad Soledet Bo. And for us, Faradim, in order to put back a liquid, it still has to be Yad Soledet Bo. If it's cooled down to less than Yad Soledet Bo, what's Yad Soledet Bo? We said you can eat it regularly. That's not Yad Soledet Bo. If you can't eat it right away, right? You can't drink it right away. That's already Yad Soledet Bo. It's forbidden. So once we follow the opinion that's forbidden by the Torah to cook a liquid, even if it was cooked once before. The other portion is not putting it down on the floor. We'll deal with that later with the halachot of Chazarah. But that is that. Now, the Ashkenazim, I'll just read this point because we're talking about it. Ashkenazic Jews practice a leniency to return liquid food, such as soup, to the fire, even if it's cooled down to a temperature lower than Yad Soledet Bo, as long as it's still warmer than room temperature. On the other hand, they practice two more strictencies. One may return food to the fire only if one had intentions to return it. So when they take it off, they have to have the kavanah to return it. And one must hold on to the pot from the time one removed it, from the tire until one removed it. Those are two more gezerot of hazarah that they put in because they allow to put back less than Yad Soledet. Okay, we who do not put back if it's less than Yad Soledet Bo don't have those two extra things that you need to do in order to put it back. Okay, fine. That deals with this section. Now, moving on. So now we come to our Temanim. All right. So says the Pnini Halacha, doesn't Melamed, Uvnei Olei Teman. Okay. Yesham Rabim Shenoigim Kedata Rambam. Many of them hold like the Rambam. And the Fiza in Bishnu Marek Be'ev Shabbat, Beinucho b'Mekarar, and they put it in the refrigerator. Mutar b'Shabbat lo'tzio b'Mekarar b'Anicho b'Makom she'achol le'tchamem ad she'yarteach. You can put it back on the lech, even in a place that's going to come to a boil again.
Soup, okay, it's water, no.
Oh, so you hold it like tal. So they hold it like tal. Okay, very good. So you made a good point over there. So they can do it. They can put back a soup. They can put back a soup. According to the Temanim, who hold like the Rambam, there's ain bishul acher bishul by liquid except for water, something that's plain. Okay, we saw that.
It's not
Because that's chimum. Remember, that's not bishul. It's chimum. Okay. Now he brings there interesting halacha. Page 322 on the top. Now, kasher misha noy kishulchan aruch or harama. Miterach etzel temani shenoeg kerambam. You became a guest by a temani who holds like the Rambam. All right. Mutter. Now he comes. You're sitting there at the table, and he takes out the soup. Right. He takes out the soup. He puts it on the black. Puts it on the hot plate. It's warming up, and then he comes and he serves it to you. You're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to eat it.
I'm going to take it home.
You're not going to come out of the house. So right, we have to deal with that Rambam later. It's dealt with. Don't worry. The guest takes it out. He's doing his minhag. He says everyone's allowed to eat it. So you can get temani and tell them to come to your your party, your suda, tell them to put it on. I don't know if you can tell them to put it on. Maybe it's a different story. So it's good to have some temani friends, right?
If you have a living, you can ask a goy to put it on. No?
Right. We'll deal with that in a minute. What did you say? Oh, you guys have it too. Okay.
We also eat grasshoppers, so.
Oh yeah, Morocco also eat grasshoppers? I didn't know that. Oh, this past week's parsha, there were certain grasshoppers there, coach. Fine.
That's
All right. Like Bishul. All right. Now, the Orlet Zion in source 43, the Orlet Zion wants to say that even though we Sephardim hold it has to be Yad Soleded Bo to return, but Sheyesh Lahakil B'Shatz HaTzarech. There's a big tzarech. I'm not sure what the tzarech is, but there's a tzarech. So I don't know, a big bar mitzvah. There's someone's not feeling well. I don't know, some sort of tzarech. Then he says that perhaps we could take it, right? He could take it, the liquid, right, and he puts it near the fire and takes it off right before Yad Soleded Bo, which was Rashi last week. We said we don't hold like, but he says you can do it over here for Shatz Tzarech. Shatz Tzarech says you can do it. Because first of all, he says you have the Rambam, that there really is no cooking after cooking even by liquid. And then you have Rashi, who says you could put it there as long as you take it right beforehand. So you can rely on that in a Shatz Tzarech. That's the Orlet Zion. In the little box over here, he says, on the other hand, Mishnah Berurah says that Ashkenazim may not place cold liquids close to the heat and remove them. You can't do what the Orlet Zion is saying to do. Mishnah Berurah says don't do it. Shalom Yashiv, he said that Ashkenazim are allowed to do it. They're allowed to be lenient as well for B'Shatz HaTzarech. So you have this thing you can do. Chamuvadia. Exactly. What does Shatz HaTzarech mean?
Other food to eat or something?
Needed. It's needed. Shatz HaTzarech. It's something that you can't go without. But however it works. Okay. We'll have to deal with Shatz HaTzarech, Shatz HaChag, and all those definitions at a later point. But right now, just to get the ideas. The Yibiyah Omer brings down, so Chamuvadia brings down. This is what you were saying before, that you can ask a guy to put the liquid onto the hot. You can ask a guy to put the soup onto the hot plate.
It was a blackout to chat.
Even if it's not a blackout. Even if it's not a blackout. He said you can do it. You can do it. Why? Why you say you can do it? First of all, right, you have the Rambam, Rashba, and Ran, who says there is no cooking a liquid after it's already cooked. Okay. And it's only asking a guy, right? And which is only derabanan. And so you have this derabanan, you have this derabanan, you have this, you have that. Make it derabanan v'lekula. So it says you can ask a guy to put it on, so you don't need the temani. You can ask the guy. Okay, you can use the guy. Okay, the Yibiyah Omer brings another idea what you can do. And he says you can make it a grama, right? Get your hot plate on a timer, okay? Put your hot plate on the timer. Put the soup on there before the timer goes on, and then the timer will go on. So you have the Rashba and Rambam, and the Rashba, Rambam, and the Ran. There's no cooking after cooking, and it's a grama. It's a grama, so it's not direct. So therefore, it would be permissible. Okay, that's what he brings down over here from the Yibiyah Omer. Here in the here he writes also outside the surah for a moment in the laws of Shabbat. He writes as well, one may heat a cooked liquid on a hot plate that is set on a timer that will turn on after the soup is placed on the hot plate. Okay, so a person is allowed to do that. So you're allowed to do that. So you don't even need the guy, just need the timer. Okay, you don't need anybody, just yourself with the timer on a hot plate. Now, before we move on, I have some other points I would like to bring out. Can a Sephardi ask an Ashkenazi to put his liquid that's cooled down, but not completely cool, to put it back on the hot plates? Can we do that or not?
For
For himself.
Total drama. Total drama.
That will take part of it.
Okay. So
Probably not.
So let's take a look. I'll bring you two sources, both quoting Chacham Ovadia and saying two different things. So you have to decide.
Now they ask us to open the bottles.
Okay. It says a Sephardic student in Ashkenazic yeshiva who discovers that the kitchen staff follow the leniency of reheated cooked liquid foods that have a temperature less than Yad Soledet Bo. You don't have to protest as long as they fulfill their conditions necessary for Hazara, right? They have kavanah, they're holding on to the pot, right? Even if they're doing it for you, you don't have to protest it. However, he writes, it's forbidden for a Sephardic Jew to instruct an Ashkenazic Jew to place warm liquid food or a pot that's mostly liquid onto the fire on Shabbat. Since for a Sephardi, you can't do this, you cannot ask an Ashkenazi Jew to do this. But if the Ashkenazi Jew is such a good guy, he does it for you anyway, you don't have to protest it. Okay? So in the Yalkut Yosef over here, he says, you can't ask. They do it, good. Can't ask. So then, while I was learning, I said, let me tell you what he brings over here. So here in the laws of Shabbat, he brings down as follows, and I'll read the note on the bottom. It is permitted for a Sephardi to ask an Ashkenazi to reheat a davar lach that is not fully cooled, but is no longer Yad Soledet Bo. And he says it's mutar. You could ask. So the Yalkut Yosef says you can't. Here he says you could. So in the note he writes that in the Chazon Ovadia originally, it's written you should not ask. Only if they do it, then you don't have to stop them. He says, however, I saw in the new edition of the Yalkut Yosef, I don't know which year, he doesn't write the year. I don't know when this one was made and when this he's writing. But then he says he even asked Chacham Yitzchak Yosef in person. And he said that it is permitted to ask an Ashkenazi to put your cooled liquid, not completely cool, right, back onto the fire. So you have here, and this is printed later in this book, when he says he asked Chacham Yitzchak Yosef personally, and he said that was, Chacham Yitzchak said that was Chacham Ovadia's opinion, that you could ask an Ashkenazi to put back the liquid that is not yet cooled down completely, but is no longer Yad Soledet Bo. So take what you want from it. Seems like you could ask an Ashkenazi Jew to put it for you. What seems to come out. Okay. Now, what about the timer and the asking the guy to Ashkenazi? Chavadim said you could do this. What about Ashkenazim? Would they hold to this? So he brings over here in the box from the Bir Lacham Piskei Shuvot, and they both say Ashkenazim would not be in favor of this. They would not be in favor of asking a guy to put it. They would not be in favor in using a timer. They have a lot of times Ashkenazim like to do this thing, what's called a low plug. Tusser here, tusser everywhere, straight down the line. Don't make it here okay, and then here okay, and then people get confused. They have this thing, low plug. That's it. So he says, based on the low plug, therefore they would not do these things.
This is what I see by Ashkenazim. They are a lot more machmir.
Yeah, because they do this low plug and everything.
Over here, it seems like they are more mekel. I know they are more machmir.
They're mekel, but in order to be mekel, they added on more chumras. Right? You have to hold on to it. You have to have kavanah to return it. Right? So that's a really like classic Ashkenazi way of doing things. You do one thing this way, you got two other ways the other way. Okay? So you have to know the halakha based on where you're coming from. Okay, let's try to get through one more topic for today, which is you told me there's ein bishul acher bishul by a solid. And for all intents and purposes, there is bishul acher bishul by liquids. That's why we don't return it something that's less than Yad Soledet Bo, right? We have our coolers of how we can do it, but we don't do it normally. So what happens if I have a food that is nishta solid and nishta liquid? It's mixed. It's something in between, right? It's half and half. What is the status of that food? Would it make a difference? Or once it's solid, it's solid, or once it's liquid, or does it make a difference?
Only if it gets better.
So so here we have it gets better. If it gets worse, you have these different opinions. Before we even get to where that is, we might mention that a little bit. Let's just get the basics over. So, says Rabbeinu Yerucham in the Toldot Adam v'Chava. He writes as follows. So in the bolded part, it says, as anything containing liquid has liquid. It is a true bishul to return it while it's cold to the stove and allow it to continue to cook and contract, right, mistamek, and it's considered a mivashel gomer. So the first Rabbeinu Yerucham that we have, he says anything that has liquid is it's considered liquid and you can't return it. There's a Shebesh Avish, as long as it has some liquid. Now the Bet Yosef, he quotes Rabbeinu Yerucham, and he quotes him with a different lashon. In the Bet Yosef, source 47, Katav Rabbeinu Yerucham b'chelik Gimel, b'shem Harav Rabbeinu Yonah, dekol sherubo rotav, ain't that it's majority, it's liquid, and it contracts and get's better. That's what Chaim was talking about. Right? So when it's majority liquid, that's the lashon you have to pay attention to here. So the Rabbeinu Yerucham straight says any liquid has any amount of liquid. You can't put it back on the fire. Here in the Bet Yosef's version, Rabbeinu Yerucham, it's when it's sherubo rotev, when the majority is liquid. Okay, so now we start with Shulchan Aruch Harav. Shulchan Aruch Harav, right? That's the Chabad Shulchan Aruch, right? And he writes, Tav Shel Yavish she'ein boy rotev klal. There's no liquid. Ein boy bishul acher bishul. Im nitvashel kvar kol tzarcho va'afil nistanan legamre. Has to be absolutely no liquid. That's Shulchan Aruch Harav.
Yeah.
Okay. Now comes Rav Avram Chaim Noeh. Now, who is Rav Avram Chaim Noeh? We don't go into the biography of the people.
He was the expert, very, very much.
In Shiurim, right?
Yes.
But
yes.
people don't know this,
Yes.
that he's Lubavitch, first of all. He's Lubavitch Chassid.
Really?
Yeah. His father was a Rosh Yeshiva in the yeshiva that was founded by the Sdei Chemed. Yes, there was a Sephardi. So his father was yeshiva in the Sephardic yeshiva. He learns there, then he goes to learn Rav Diskin, who was, I assume he's a Litvak, got smicha from him. Okay. Then, when he was 21 years old, he goes to Bukhara. Right? He goes to Bukhara to collect money for the Eretz Yisrael, Matzah and Eretz Yisrael, for Yeshua and Eretz Yisrael, the poor in Eretz Yisrael. While he's there, typical Bukharian way of doing things, we invited him to be rabbi. We saw a guy with a nice big beard, a nice hat, come and be rabbi. He said, big I'm not making fun. But he says, hey, come and be rabbi. He stayed there for 2 years. And while he's there, he wrote a famous sefer, Chadul Chonar, and a guide for bar mitzvah boys. Then he comes back to Israel. World War II breaks out. Where does he end up? In Egypt.
You know,
World War I. The World War I breaks out. He goes to Egypt. He becomes he opens a yeshiva in Egypt for Sephardic boys. He writes Shenot Hayim, a practical guide for halacha for the weekdays according to the Sephardic custom. Okay, he comes back there to Israel after World War I, and Bukharian community, Shana Bukhara, they come and they say you can be the rabbi in our community. So they get him back. Okay, Bukharians get him back as their rabbi. And while he was there, that's when he writes his famous Sfarim. In Ketzot HaShulchan, he writes Shiurei Torah, and that's the Shiurei Torah is where all the Shiurim according to him. So you have him and the Chazon Ish, Rav Chaim Noeh and the Chazon Ish, right? And and this is the individual. All those the opinions, that's him. He was very bucky. Ketzot HaShulchan. All right, Ketzot HaShulchan. So we have a Bukharian connection here, somewhat. Okay, that's why I went into it a little bit. Okay, now, so he writes for Ashkenazim. So he's writing, how do you differentiate if the tafshil is liquid or solid? If it has, because Shulchan Aruch Harav said, somebody wrote the cloud. What does it mean?
Turn around, it will fall or no, it will start.
So he says as follows. Meaning, a tafshil lach ketzad, it has to be something that's not wet enough that if you put it in something else, can't make it wet. Right? It can have moisture, but it can't make something else wet. That's what he says. If it's possible to make something else wet, that would be considered a wetty liquid and you can't reheat it.
So maybe a dried potato is perfect. But
No.
if you have a steak, a steak is gonna mix.
So that's already Ashkenazim have many different opinions. Sfaradim is no problem. No problem.
I like it. I like it like that. Steak with a potato. That's what I'm telling you.
We go by the majority.
Yeah.
By the majority. We'll go by the majority. They go by it has to be solid. Yeah.
liquid.
מסייע להצביח, מסייע לו להיות something else.
You have just a piece of
No,
steak,
you
no
hold-
gravy, no nothing.
Okay, so we'll get into the grading. Give me a minute. I'm done. We have 15 minutes. Let me get through this. You know, 2-3 pages. Let me do this.
Something else away.
Okay, 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 okay. All right.
Beef jerky. if you want.
Okay. The Rav Moshe finds English Moshe. He says, you know, according to the opinion, according to Bet Yosef, said it makes a difference if it's Rubo Rotav, not Rubo Rotav. He says, I don't understand it. If the problem is reheating a liquid, then why would it make a difference if it's majority liquid or not majority liquid? If you can't reheat up a liquid, you can't reheat up a liquid. So he says it must be with Reb Chaim said before, if it's going to get better the food, or it's going to less the food. If it's liquid, it gets better. If it's a solid, it gets worse. So therefore, you can put it not this, that. He says
liquid gets burned right away, or maybe
right. So he says maybe that's the opinion. So he just says he's just interested in what's going on over there. He says b'shas chak, you could go according to this opinion that if it's a majority solid, you'll be able to put even if it's liquid. Now, Rabbi Yatz, right, in his 39 Malachot, he writes over here. This is for Ashkenazim. So listen to this, and then we'll go into the Sfardim. A davar yavish does not have to be totally dry in every sense. Okay, even a moist food may be classified as a davar yavish as long as there's no significant accumulation of gravy or other liquid. So there could be some gravy, some liquid. It can be a significant amount. For example, a cold roast chicken is considered davar yavish, even though the surface of the chicken is often moist with the gravy or juice. Similarly, meat with meatballs, vegetables, and other cooked roasted foods are all classified davar yavish even when moist. However, if food is indeed classified davar lach, liquid, if it contains an accumulation of liquid. There's a lot of liquid there. Example, meatballs and sauce. Right? The meatball is not just meatball, meatballs and sauce. Right? That's a problem for them. Chicken and soup, meat and gravy are all considered davar lach for practical purposes because of the accumulated liquid of which they are parts. So it seems Ashkenazim, like it's a little liquid, that's fine, right? But it can't be a significant amount. It can't be like you really like see the liquid. It should be just like a glaze or something like that, a little bit of it, that's fine. Okay? Now,
Not be swimming in it.
right. Now, for us, what about for us? So says the Abiyah Omer, source 43. He writes, only if it is the majority is liquid. Otherwise, it is yavish. It's considered dry. She'em bo mishum bishul acher bishul. K'mo shekatav Maran habet Yosef b'shem Rabbeinu Yerucham. So Chama says we go like Rabbeinu Yerucham that's brought down in the Bet Yosef that it's only a problem if it's majority liquid. If it's minority liquid, it's fine to warm up. Okay, yeah. Now in the Malachot of Shabbat, this beautiful sefer over here, on page 80 over here, he wants to write as follows. Okay, majority of the liquid is if the majority of the mixture is liquid, then it's considered liquid. You cannot reheat it. All right. However, the majority of the mixture is solid. Then he says it's a solid, and the reasoning he says is as follows: is mentioned as Reb Chaim mentioned before. Mitztamek v'yafelo, mitztamek v'ralo. The poskim say that if the majority of the mixture is solid, then reheating it is drawing out the liquid, and it's considered mitztamek v'ralo, and therefore it's permitted if it's majority solid. But if it's majority liquid, then we say and mitztamek v'yafelo, and therefore it would be forbidden. Okay. Now, what about? He says that there's one exception. What about if I have a soup that has more solid than liquid?
More solid than liquid.
Yeah, there's less water and there's more solid.
So this is stomach veralo. Because
So he says they would not. No, he says
The primary is the water in the soup.
okay. He says, you know why? He says there, even though it's more solid than the soup, it's still noticeable that it's soup, right? It's noticeable. It has a shame of soup. It has a shame of being a liquid food, right? It's not like the other foods that we're talking about, the majority bishul, majority solid. It's like, what's the food? I'm not sure if it's liquid or not, but soup, everyone knows soup is a liquid.
Somebody's shown to like almost like a salad.
What about the food? If the way of cooking the food is that way?
What do you mean that way?
Just for example, there's peppers. We do peppers,
Okay.
and the cooking of it is 7-8 hours.
Okay.
There is not about low cooking. breaks all the liquid out.
זה מסתפק
So when you
בטוב
look
לו.
at it, you see the peppers, you don't see the liquid,
Okay.
but when you dip,
You see liquid inside.
like,
זה
the
מסתפק
liquid
בטוב
comes
לו.
out.
זה מסתפק בטוב לו.
And if you
ופה
put, by the way, if
אתה
you
אומר,
put it on the heating up again, it gets mad.
What do you guys do? Can you heat it up?
We're not heating.
You don't heat it up. So you're holding that it's
Yeah, the
liquidish.
motion, yes.
Okay, so you're holding
זה
that it's a liquid.
מסתפק בטוב לו, אז אסור.
Um,
למה? כמה שאתה שם את זה יותר,
Yeah,
נהיה יותר
yeah,
טעים.
yeah.
יותר טעים.
okay, so that's on that. Now, what's considered a solid versus a liquid? The real question here, the question that they deal with, and many examples. What about Rav Moshe was asked about ketchup? All right, ketchup. Is it a solid or a liquid? If I have a hot chicken, right, and I want to put ketchup on it, is it ketchup a liquid? I know it doesn't taste good. But if ketchup is a liquid, then there's Bishul there. My hot chicken is cooking the ketchup. So is ketchup a liquid or not? So Rav Moshe says ketchup is a liquid. He says, you know what's a liquid? You take it out of the container, it doesn't stay in its shape anymore. However, Rav Shlomo Zalman, as well here, he brings some from Avadi, he says as well that ketchup is not considered a liquid. Since it's a thick consistency, it has a shame of a solid.
This is Agdara, that's the Agdara, the definition.
Yeah.
Okay,
So he says that's the definition. It's solid enough. And therefore you could put your ketchup on a hot food. It's solid, it's not considered bishul, it's not considered bishul. Okay. The last point over here was a question that came up in the yeshiva. All right, so Yeshiva Bracham have this thing to somehow get the chulent on Friday nights, right? The chulent's for the next morning, but they get to it Friday nights. So if you look at the note 54, Rabbi Yehuda Spitz recounts the original story of this question. A number of students in the yeshiva in Israel took chulent from the yeshiva chulent pot on Friday night and discovered that the chicken bones in the chulent were not yet totally cooked. And they were unsure whether they can return the pot back onto the fire, even when following the laws of Chazarah, which we'll deal with later. So they sent the question to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and to Rav Moshe Feinstein, who both gave back different answers. Okay, so the question was, the food was cooked, but the bones weren't yet soft. Right? Now, what's with the
So this is Mahal ben Dorosai. כאילו.
for the bones?
Yeah.
For the bones. Now, what's the idea with the bones?
Huh?
You know the bone.
You don't eat the bone.
Right. But
You
what's the
don't
idea
eat-
with the bones?
You don't eat
So
the bone.
apparently they
Usually
then
people don't eat
then
the
in
bone.
Eretz Yisrael, they would eat the bones, chew the bones. They would do something with the bones.
The marrow.
The Americans didn't. Okay, so that's why Rav Shlomo Zalman and Rav Moshe gave two different answers. Okay, so Rav Shlomo Zalman in source 55, he says that even for them, for those in Eretz Yisrael, don't chew them. It's forbidden to return them before the bones have become soft, because that's derech achila. They get soft. Moshe, on the other hand, says, I don't care what some people do when they eat the bones. He says eating bones is not considered eating. It's American. You don't eat bones. Okay, right? It's not considered eating bones, and therefore, cooking does not constitute cooking of food. We don't look at the bones. It's not our business. We're about the food.
Listen, we love the bone. We love the marrow, and everything else.
Some chulent starts out as a liquid, but after it's on the fire, some of these chulents they come like a one big solid mass, like a mashed potato. It's so thick. It's
So what's the din of it?
liquid anymore. Liquid.
So is it a solid or a liquid
I
at that
don't know.
point?
I'm
You
thinking
have to ask them.
maybe turn into a consideration.
All right, we'll end up with the Yalkut Yosef, and the Yalkut Yosef deals with this question as well. Okay, it was brought to the Yalkut Yosef afterwards. What do you do with these bones? So he says the view of my master, my father, Rav Avad Yosef, is similar to the view of Rav Moshe Feinstein, that it's not usual to eat chicken bones, and one does not have this in mind when cooking. When I'm cooking the food, I'm cooking the food. I'm not caring about the bones. Therefore, for us, no one is concerned about this. Cooking the bones considered psik reisha, the law ichpat lei. I don't really want it. It doesn't care for me. As the intention, the one who places the cover upon the pot is entirely on the cooked food and not on the bones. Right? Because we say the food's not cooked yet. On Shabbat, you cannot put the pot in it because you're making it cook more. Right? But if the bones are not yet soft, the food is cooked, but the bones are not yet soft, you can put the cover on, because we're not worried about the bones. It's not something that we're eating, not something that we want. Therefore, a person would be allowed to put in on. It is time.
You think it's dafka chicken or
Bone. I think it's bones in general. It's just the question was about chickens, but it's bones in general.
Those big bones, and the gelatin, small
Yeah.
gelatin,
Yeah, the time.
that gives the taste to the hamid.
Yeah,
And when if it's break,
The marrow,
cold,
the marrow.
we get-
of the big bone.
flank?
Not chicken, not chicken. The
Flanking.
behemah.
Kevin,
Yeah.
מה שאתה לוקח.
Flanking.
So I put something here. Let me just do something. I put something here. Let me just see if we mentioned it or not. Okay. Okay. And we'll end with this. We'll end with it. Let's take a look at Yalkut Joseph outside of the Tzurba. By the way, we finished. It's our Shir Bet on Hilchot Bishul, but it's the Shir Aleph in the Tzurba. Next week we start with the new Tzurba Merabanan. We have the books here. Thank you to our sponsors. Here he says as follows. Listen to this, Rabotai. We had the question about mixture. So says the Yalkut Yosef writes as follows. As long as most of its contents are solids, the entire pot of food is considered a solid food. Therefore, it was already completely cooked. It could be brought again onto the hot plate or the covered fire, and you're allowed to put it back. Okay? When a cooked food is heated up, some of its broth evaporates and its quality is impaired. Right? That's what we were saying. It's the make maralo. Rabbi Yerucham ruled that if the further cooking of a liquid food impairs its quality, it's not considered malacha mevashel, and it's written on Shabbat.
So you don't want it.
This ruling is not many poskim, since one intention to warm the solid food and the reheating of the broth is only act incidental. All what I want is the food. I don't care about the liquid getting heated up with it as well. It's permissible to place an electric warming tray on Shabbat. Now, if there's a great deal of broth on the food, it's a lot of liquid, it's forbidden to reheat it. It's considered liquid food. Now, anyone who follows the more strict opinion, he writes over here, anyone who follows the more strict opinion and refrains from warming a cooked food on the fire on Shabbat, even if it contains even a small amount, will receive a special bracha from Shabbat. So he says here, but technically, halacha we hold that you could, if it's a majority is solid. Ashkenazi Jews have the practice of reheating any food, even if it's totally liquid, as long as it's not yet cooled down, right? But then they have those extra when it comes to the chazara. They have to have the intention, and they have to hold it. Only if it's a davar yavish.
I thought even that they don't do it. They put it like on top of a pot or something.
Okay, so that's a whole different thing. That's the more laws in chazara. We'll deal with that when we get there. So just to so we finished over here. Just to get your little appetite wet for next week. We have a few minutes, just get your appetite a little bit wet next week. So here we have the 8th volume 18, and we have here, starting next week, we're doing already Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi, all these halachot and Bishul. Okay, we're going to get into the practical applications, making tea on Shabbat. Right, we'll go through those dinim. We have stirring the pot, the ladle, a lot of interesting parts. Okay. Then today yesterday we were just dealing with the definitions of what's bishul for a liquid, what's bishul for a solid, and how it works. Now all the other dinim, bishul acher afia, is there bishul acher afia? That's the shear afterwards. Making the food go faster. Then you have all the rabbanons, shiyah, you have chazara, hatmana. So you have all these things. This takes us pretty much through this halfway through the sefer before we get into the next chazara, chasatmana, and then we get into disha v'schita, which is the next malacha. So we have a long journey ahead of us. Just a schedule note. We have 10. Okay, just a schedule note. Next week there will be shiur, but the Sunday before the Chag. Right after Shabbat Gadol, it won't be shiur that Sunday. Okay, everyone's busy. Monday night's the Chag. Sundays. Well, and there won't be shiur. They won't be shiur on Chol Hamoed either. Okay, the shiur will resume after Pesach, the first Sunday after the Chag. Okay.
אני כל כך שמח, אני שומע דברי תורה פה, ושהראה כמו נתינתה של התורה מסיני. זכיתם לרב כזה צדיק. ברוך השם, אני לפני 7 חודשים חיתנתי בן, הוא משרת בעזה, עכשיו הוא נמצא חצי שנה בעזה, כל מי שיכול לעזור, אני אראה לכם פה פוסטים, מי שרוצה לראות, יש לי תמונות, איפה הוא נמצא ומשרת, ברגע זה שאתם, אני מדבר איתכם, הוא לוחם עכשיו בעזה. כל מי שיכול לעזור, יהיה לכם ברכה והצלחה, סייעתא דשמיא, הצלחתם, ולתת אשראי, וגם, מה שתקראו, כולם נמצאים.
אוקיי, רבי חנן בהקשר אומר.
That's